Oh, how was that? Comments, questions? Let's do it. What do you
Is
say,
this the only
friend?
time? Is this the only time that you guys do it as a group?
It's the only group I'm part of. Um,
Yeah. So you only do it on a Saturday?
yeah, it's beautiful to do it in a group.
You kind of lent to it in the first session. How you didn't quite just go speak more about it, but in the first session you said something that kind of made me think that there's what the equivalent of what they call it, whatever, a corporate anointing, whatever. When there's a group, there seems to be an increase.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I definitely. There's definitely exactly that. There's a where two or more are gathered in my name. There's levels of the presence of God. We know that, and there's no question that when more temples of God come together, there's you know there are things and kind of even geographically saturates places, but these are all mysteries.
Yeah.
What do you say, Mr. Cadwallader? You got a big smile on your face.
I don't have a lot to say. I love this, man. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Any thoughts on the discussion from earlier on rest? Hey,
Hey, Rob.
hi.
Hi. Isaiah 64, what verse?
Let me be exact. I think it's around verse 4, but I will confirm for you. Could be verse 3 or verse 5.
Okay, I'll look. I enjoyed coming from that perspective of the waiting. It made it richer, brought me into his presence. Um, I like that a lot.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, thank you.
Some of us maybe need that idea more than others. And I'm certainly one of those that I can almost feel it as a physical thing sometimes in centering prayer where I almost just have to let go. There's this like push deep inside of me, this like drive that doesn't even know what it's driving at or for. And I find early on in my time, just like it's almost like a thought, just letting go of it. Just it's sometimes I even find it in my body, if you know what I mean, like a tense stomach, and then it's linked to just letting go of a tense stomach or whatever. But it's a deeper thing. It's a drive, that
Rob, I was thinking about this week, and I was in the context of talking to my son about that. You need to keep up on things, right? Because the law of entropy says that if left alone, things dissipate and they tend to disorder, not to order. And the unless energy is applied to them, they tend toward disorder, right? Which is true, and it's true on so many levels in our life. That's a really good thing. But what this is saying is that we need to cease from being that energy applied to all the things in our lives, and let God be the energy. I don't mean that in a mystical sense, but let God supply the power to keep things in order in our lives.
yeah, that's brilliant. But it takes, you know, this is where this is different from Zen, Buddhism, or something like that. You're not trying to disappear, become nothing, do as little as possible. This is a real spiritual work.
Right.
But it's a work of receiving. It's not a work of giving or doing or pushing. It's a work of dependence, or it's a work of rest, but it's a work. And it's like Jesus. I do what I see my Father doing. He's at work, and he's always at work. Jesus said, I just catch the slipstream, you know, of what the Father's doing. Is really the right spiritual posture for all of life. But interestingly, I mean, there are physical analogies to this. I'm told the activity that many of the best, like, you know, high divers and athletes have before a move is they're not standing up on that platform kind of thinking through every movement, psyching themselves up. They're just trying to be as silent and as quiet as possible, just as restful as possible. But Bob, it was Isaiah 64 verse 4. You can almost miss it because it's the B part of the verse. The whole verse goes, "For from the days of old they have not heard or perceived by ear, nor has the eye seen a God besides you, who acts on behalf of the one who waits for him." And that's New American, but the NIV says who works on behalf of the one who waits for him. What do you think, Don?
I think what happens for us is we get into this point of rest, and we're really starting to surrender. Then the mind wants to kick in and apply thoughts on how, or like we said earlier, the formula on how we can proceed forward and always do this. Whereas Jesus, it was moment by moment, day by day, of that surrender to the awareness of God working in him and the alignment with that. Last night, my wife and I were walking, and I became so aware of God in the sky. It was like a masterpiece created by him. And for years, I would look at the sky, and that was nice. But all of a sudden, because we're spending time surrendering to him, you're now becoming more attuned to him everywhere and what he's doing. And that's what we're building on. But then what I find, at least for me, my mind then wants to go to work subtly, and jump in there and assist. And so what I'm working on is getting the mind to stop and to discern that sooner than later. Because the mind just takes off.
And I just want to encourage all of us. I don't know where you guys are all at with how active your mind is. But like I said, I'm coming up for 2 years here. And to be honest, in the last 2 or 3 months, I feel like my mind is all over the place. It's just,
Yes.
There's just so much distraction in my times. It's not less. It's as much as when I started. And that's where you have to remember one of the very first things we spoke about, that this is not a concentrative practice. There are types of meditation where you concentrate on something specific, so you use your mind to quiet your mind. This is an activity of the heart and the spirit, so you're not using willpower and the power of your mind to silence your mind, and that's why it's so much healthier and spiritually transformative. And you have to just be really gentle with yourself. So in a 20-minute time, sometimes it feels to me like my mind's just all over the show for 18 minutes. But let me tell you, it just takes 1 nanosecond of silence that you're having in between those thoughts for God to do something really powerful. And the thoughts themselves that are coming are part of the process, and it's the lack of rest, right? And the issues and things that are coming out. And yeah, you might sit in that boat for 3 minutes and then feel like a fool, but you shouldn't. Because it's not important that you were 3 minutes in the boat of a thought getting carried away. It's important that you got out of the boat, even just once. And then for the next 1 second, while you got out of the boat and you're actually quiet, that's when the work's happening. So, like by God's grace, there are times when I feel almost like, to change the analogy of the water, like I'm walking on water, like, wow, this is surreal. It's such an amazing feeling. I'm not thinking. I'm having this experience and I'm not thinking, and it's beautiful. But I often don't have that. And I think the Lord allows that we don't often have that, so that we can process, we can practice that letting go muscle, brings rest, etc. So hopefully that's encouraging. It's
I throw an analogy in there from the New Testament, where when you become a brand new believer, it's almost like you're in this bubble, and everything is so amazing. But then as you grow a little, then the tests and the trials come, and you have to wrestle with them, and then you're saying to yourself, did I lose the presence of God? What happened? My beginning was so amazing, and now it's like I'm walking through a forest. And I think it's the same way with this. When you begin to open up your heart, it's like God lets you know how real this is. But then as you're going along, like Rob said, yeah, I agree. This last few weeks, my mind has been everywhere, in running interference consistently, and you can almost get a little frustrated, but you realize this is part of the journey. This is part of the process. Do I really believe this? Do I really know that this is God? And if it is, I'm not going to back off, because I understand these other things do happen. Does that make sense?
so wonderful. And then there's sometimes like today where I just had, despite a lot of distractions in my head, just a very rich sense of God's presence. But equally, there are other times when that's not there. I don't want to say what percentage it is for me. Probably right now, more than half of the times there is some sense of God's presence. Sometimes it's just a fresh sense, like walking through a forest and smelling something you haven't smelled before, and it's just so beautiful. But by the same token, when that's not happening, the work is equally happening, because Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And his work in us is not boring and template-like, and we are very intricate and beautifully created creatures that are artworks. We're not like, boom, you start this and you're a German machine, and you know, and then this happens and then you're done. So it's just a case. Oh, there's one last thing I wanted to say. Thomas Keating often says that a key to this practice In fact, let me read you this quote of his. It's a very powerful and beautiful quote. It's not only a key to this practice, but it is a key to the whole spiritual life. And what he says is this: the basic disposition in the spiritual journey is the ability to accept all of reality, God, ourselves, other people, and all of creation as they are. It's a huge step of progress when you can accept. Accept. Just accept what's going on. Even a bad thing, even a sickness. Pippa and I were talking about this with respect to her mom who's got cancer. The first step is accepting that this is going to happen. And from there, you can move into saying, but I want healing. So you've got to at least provisionally accept what exists. And because otherwise, if she doesn't get healed, there's a disaster. I'm not okay, God's not okay, something's wrong. It's first, I'm accepting this. And then it's, but God, is there something greater that you can do than this? I hope that makes sense, but I'm trying to apply it to centering prayer, where if you accept what's going on in these 20 minutes without judgment, without beating yourself up, it's a very powerful step of progress.
And think about this. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think for me, that's been one of the powerful things about the concept of rest. I kind of got started on some of this stuff maybe a year or two ago, and I found that the process of rest for me was coming to a place where I was learning to be accepted by the Father's love with where I was at. And it was only when I was able to do that, I could actually honestly look at, realize where I'm at so that I could grow. If I wasn't able to be satisfied with where I'm at in the Father's love, then I couldn't healthily actually figure out what the next step to grow is. And that's the weird thing about rest to me, is the best way to grow is to enter into rest, because then we can actually be fully self-aware of where we're at with the Father.
Brilliant.
And it blows my mind, but it's like, what's the fastest way to grow? Learn to rest.
And Stuart, you've just articulated what righteousness is.
Yeah.
Righteousness is being right with God. It's being okay in His eyes.
Yeah.
Just the way you are. Righteousness is by no means getting everything right. Righteousness is that you are all right. But the reality, and Abraham became righteous by faith. So righteousness is not something you do, it's something you believe.
Yeah.
And so...
And I find that idea helpful too for me when I do I haven't been in all the classes, so I might be rehashing something, but I've found that really helpful as I meditate or try and be silent. I have so many thoughts that go through my head, but it's almost like learning to accept it, and then if the Lord highlights it, let it be brought to the Father in a way that actually heals it, instead of trying to ignore it or do the charismatic, this isn't me, all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Anyway.
No, it's wonderful. Hey, I wanted to end with, it's a pity Drew's not on today and he couldn't make the call, but him and I had dinner on Wednesday night, and I hope he won't mind me stealing his story, but he was just telling me it's a beautiful testimony. This week, he spoke in front of 450 people at the launch of a new industry association that he's the chairman of, and he was sitting in between the Attorney General of Michigan and the head of the regulatory authority, and he did this speech, and he said, Rob, I just want you to know I could never have done this 2 months ago. it's this process that's given me the confidence, and you know, he's still struggling to articulate how and what and stuff, but it's the love of God that he knows, you know, that's given him the confidence. And so I hope he won't mind me saying this. I don't think so. And so he did a great speech, and he said he had a great session of centering prayer in the morning, and then a few other times during the day leading up to that speech, he just got quiet, and that really just, you know, so really it's an example of how motion should come from rest. All right, folks. Well, thank you. We don't want to run too far over.